So if you've played Classic for any amount of time, I'm sure you've noticed or heard about the fact that there are a lot of bots in the mode. And unfortunately, that's just a thing that you've got to deal with. But I want to get into everything to do with bots today. So generally speaking, there are two main kinds of bots. You're going to see mostly zoo bots, and the other type of bot is a warrior, kind of a control-y warrior, but really an anti-aggro, anti-zoo warrior bot. It's much less common. You will see these bots mostly from Diamond 5 up to very low legend ranks. Reason being, bots are running 24/7. They get tons of games in. You don't even need a 50% win rate to be able to make it to Diamond 5. So that's where the zoo bots tend to cluster. And then those anti-zoo warriors, they just farm zoo bots repeatedly until they get into legend, but they don't tend to do very well against other decks, so they'll just sit in low legend for the rest of the season. Now, I highly recommend, if you haven't done this before, if you're kind of around those ranks, following this advice just to blow through those bots, try to get to legend. The meta gets shaken up a lot once you're facing real players. You'll play a variety of different decks. It's just a lot more fun once you get to those ranks. So if you're kind of bashing your head against that wall of bots, here's what I advise you do. There's these two decks that I'm going to show you here. First one is this Control Warrior. This is very close to my standard Control Warrior deck for laddering, only that I've put in a couple cleaves instead of some of the higher end minions. Normally you'd be running something like the Black Knight, Gorehell, maybe a Harrison, but here I just wanted to tech it to be a little bit better against Zoo. So the Zoo matchup, if you're familiar with Control Warrior, you probably know how to play it. A couple cleaves makes it better. You're just going to be playing to mitigate that early threat with stuff like Armorsmith, Cleave, Taskmaster, Fiery War Axe, right? Anything here. Brawl, incredibly useful. If they've got a board, you're going to be able to take out a ton of minions, and then you just end up killing them with these very, very high-end minions. Other stuff is going to allow you to get into later parts of the game, right? Shield block giving you more armor, Armorsmith generating armor, and even turns where you've got to use your hero power. Very good at getting you to some of these higher mana cards. Now, this is generally a matchup that's already favored, so the addition of a couple cleaves is just going to skew it even more in your favor, boost your win rate. Also keep in mind the bots play very poorly. They make suboptimal plays. They will shoot themselves in the face with Elven Archers. So it should be an extremely favorable matchup. Then against the warriors that you might encounter, they're very anti-aggro. So they're running things like Abomination is a common card. They're running double whirlwinds. They're running cleaves. But they cut a lot of this kind of high-end, mid-range stuff just to be extremely good at that early game mitigation. So if you've ever played in a Control Warrior mirror, it's generally about removing threats. So if you can remove their threats more efficiently than they can remove your big threats, you should win, because you'll win with whatever high-end threats are left over. Now, they've got way fewer threats than you, so all you have to do is trade somewhat efficiently with their threats, right? Using executes and shield slams, and then everything else. If you can get a 1-to-1 trade, right? A Twilight Drake. This could even be a Senjin if you want to be very defensive against Zeus, or Cairn or Sunwalker. Hitting their own Senjins, hitting their Abominations, you're almost always going to trade favorably in those cases. And then if they've got, an Alex or a Reg or a Grom at the very end of all that, very easy to deal with a single BGH or your cheap removal here. So highly, highly favored in both of those cases. The only downside of running this is games take a bit longer. So it could take a little bit longer to get out of those ranks. And that's why I also want to show you this Control Hunter. The games go much, much quicker. In those warrior matchups, because the deck plays so poorly and because it's so catered to be anti-zoo, you're going to be favored. You're not normally favored with this list against a standard Control Warrior, but it's not really that close to a standard Control Warrior. And their suboptimal play, where they do things like run a Grom into a single 1/1 on the board, it's really going to be just a fine matchup for you. You've got Deadly Shots and Freezing Trap to deal with the few large minions that they run. Hunter's Mark as well, very good tool for that. And then everything else is just the same sort of idea. Get a body out that gets a little bit of value for you. Milk your hero power as much as possible. Highmane, of course, going to be an extremely high value card. Harrison, you don't need to worry so much about Gorehal. You can just hit Fiery War Axe with it. And there's lots of great minions to steal on their end, or potentially some of your own. Yeah, super, super good here on the high end. And everything else is just going to be okay. If you're getting a few points of damage off of your companion, your bow, whatever it is, it's going to work towards your end goal. You don't have to be that efficient because they just don't have that many threats. So that is going to be a bit in your favor, less so than the Control Warrior, but the games will go faster, so it's kind of a trade-off. However, against the Zubots, this is why you play the deck. If you've never played, and I think for a lot of new players, they probably don't know this, but if you've never played Hunter against Zubots, these traps, really any trap that hunters are running, are the bane of those Zubots' existence. They are not programmed to deal with hunter secrets very well. They'll do basically one of three things. They'll either never attack ever. So if you throw up any secret, be it a freezing trap, an explosive trap, a snake trap, whatever, they'll put up to 7 minions on their board, never attack, and you can just press your hero power or play minions or spells or whatever until you win the game. Sometimes they will immediately play a bunch of minions into your explosive trap and then attack and get their minions killed before testing for the trap. Or the third thing they'll do is some weird blend of that. They'll get like 7 minions on the board, wait for 1 or 2 turns, and then attack and kill all their stuff into explosive trap. Obviously makes your Unleash the Hounds just ridiculously good, especially comboed with Juggler or Buzzard. But honestly, you don't even need that. This deck is favored against a human Zoo player that knows what they're doing. Right? Pyromancer in combination with stuff like Hunter's Mark tracking, any of the traps. Very good for dealing with stuff that goes wide to begin with. Explosive Trap and Unleash the Hounds are very good at dealing with stuff that goes wide to begin with. And then tracking is going to boost your efficiency of getting all of those cards early in the game. So it is super, super favored. The games are incredibly boring. I hate to say it, but you'll run through them very quickly. It's a great way to just climb the legend. And like I said, once you get there, there is an immediate shift from the meta that you're going to be accustomed to playing all these bots. You'll go from almost entirely bot games in that Diamond 5 to low Legend range to almost entirely human games, playing Legend, playing fun decks, real decks, that kind of stuff. It's also worth mentioning both of these decks are reasonably good against pretty much everything else. They're not necessarily favored in every single other matchup, but for those few games where you're not facing bots in that range, they're absolutely fine decks. And feel free to go ahead and make some small tweaks if you want to make them a little more favored to one matchup or the other. You know, a Cairn or something in this Hunter could boost its efficacy against Warriors. And of course, stuff like Whirlwind instead of maybe a BGH is going to boost the efficacy of this versus Zoo. But they're already so favored, I really don't even think it's entirely necessary. So 2 decks, but there's your general idea. Make sure you've got lots of secrets with your Hunter. Yeah, hopefully that's enough to get you out of Bot City into Legend, enjoying Classic and what the mode actually has to offer. And for veterans who already know that bots are an issue, maybe this is an alternative to what you've already got in store for your ladder climb. So best of luck out there. Hope you guys hit Legend relatively soon this season.